Welcome to the Listen to Your Footsteps podcast. I'm your host, Kojo Bafun, and this podcast is an extension of my book, also called Listen to Your Footsteps, which is a collection of essays, reflections, and poetry on things like fatherhood, identity and belonging, growing up, creativity, and the lessons learned. The purpose of this podcast is to gain insight and learn from the journeys that others have taken. I explore the worlds of art, culture, design, business, creativity, and life from the perspective of Africans who are contributing to the redefinition of the continent and who we are. So my guest today is somebody who, for me, epitomizes the word artist. I'm already sucking up very, very early. Somebody explained to me the idea of multi-disciplinary. And I think he is a artist who works across mediums that brings them together in a very thought-provoking way. So my guest is Robin Rhode. Welcome, man.
Thank you so much. Wonderful to be here.
So word on the street is that you were a really good cricket player in high school.
I cannot believe you're asking me this. Where did you get this information from?
We have
Mutual friends?
We have a mutual friend, and I can't remember how I discovered that we knew each other. Oh, you knew each other. From what he tells me, you went to CJB and he went to, is it Coronationville?
Okay, well, I'm not sure who your friend is exactly, but I was actually, correct you, I was actually at RW Fick in the suburb of Bosmont.
He was wrong. So it's actually, what did he call himself now? Joey Rasdeen. So Yusuf Rasdeen.
Yes, that's correct. Yes, I played provincial cricket with Joey in high school. I was part of the Transvaal high school team. I was a left-handed opening batsman for the provincial team, and I was a really enthusiastic cricketer. And if I look back at my youth, I think that cricket did somehow play a huge role in terms of certain mannerisms. And what I mean by that is etiquette, conducting oneself in a gentlemanly manner, showing respect to your opponent, exercising self-control, elegance. Cricket taught me elegance, balance, applying all of these basic etiquettes into one discipline. So look, I didn't really pursue a career, in cricket because art became a huge factor in my life that took me away from sport, and it took me away from cricket.
How did the art? I'm trying to get a sense of, for example, the environment. So the environment that you're in, the environment that you're growing up in. School you go to, what home is like, and you're playing sport, and then you have art come in at a time when
there was really nothing. There was really no
for most of us,
entry into modern art. No, there was nothing really. I always had this creative impulse to draw, to work with various coloring books and drawing activity books as a kid. So my passion for art was always there. And I think I reached a point in my youth, in my high school period, where I was going through a very rough time, reaching, puberty and so forth. And I needed to find some form of outlet, creative outlet, because my creative impulses were becoming really intense at that time. And I began to rebel in high school against the schooling system. I started to lack discipline. I got into a lot of trouble in school. I avoided certain school classrooms and teachers, and I just became extremely rebellious. And that was because I just could not find a creative outlet or a creative channel for myself. And I think one of the biggest influences on me as a young arty kid was the church. I think that we take church for granted, and but I grew up in the Catholic Church, and I remember seeing the church iconography, like depictions of Jesus, depictions of Hail Mary, the Stations of the Cross, all these visualizations of spirituality. I think that for many of us, the church is actually one of our first art galleries. And growing up and seeing depictions of Christ, stained glass windows and so forth, that really intrigued me. And for a young kid who had never gone to art museums or art galleries, I would say that the church was my first kind of art gallery experience, the depictions of Jesus. I'm not a religious person as such, but absolutely huge impact on me as a young person. Also, going to Sunday school as a kid and seeing biblical images, depictions. I think that was my first real understanding of visual narratives. So I would say the church was my first major influence. And the second was my father. My father is an engineer, but he was also a draftsman and has worked for many, many years in the mining industry. But growing up around my dad and going to his company and seeing the draftsman, the various drafting tools, the drawing boards, the elegance of his handwriting, the embracing of geometry and mathematical equations and so forth, structure. I think that had a massive visual impact on me as a young kid, and it took me many, many years later to actually understand or to comprehend the emotional impact of being around a draftsman, living with a draftsman, seeing him work at home, seeing how he draws and writes, and then later on, many, many years later, actually acknowledging that as an influence.
As they say, I mean, I think it was Steve Jobs who said it, and I'm paraphrasing, but we can only connect the dots backwards, right? Sometimes you have to go through, I find particularly with parents, you have to kind of go through life and reach a particular age to be able to sit back and recognize the power of what it was that they did.
Yep.
And I mean, I often say that all I hope for is that one day my children will be able to look back and go, he did the best that he could.
Yep.
Because they're still young now. So I'm the good guy or the bad guy.
Yes, but we also have to allow ourselves that the possibility of going backwards. Sometimes we stop ourselves from actually doing that. We're so focused on achieving the next thing, acquiring the next thing, that we forget to connect those backward dots. And of course, my mother as well has had a huge impact on me in terms of domesticating me and disciplining me. And still today, both my parents have a huge impact on my career in terms of their support. My father is still today I call him my art production supervisor, and my mom is my studio assistant in some way. Finding me various objects and ironing my costumes and whatever I'm doing. So they still are both very, very engaged in my art practice. So that's kind of like the beginning of my personal, the first steps into art, I would say.
Was that the thing that settled you down? I mean, you talk about being rebellious and kind of struggling as you were hitting puberty and stuff. At what stage does it become the vehicle for let's say balance and path?
I mean, even when I went to study art at tertiary level, I really struggled as well with discipline. I really struggled with understanding time. How do you manage time? How long does it take to execute or realize a work of art? I couldn't understand that. I didn't grow up at a private school education. Kids are trained to draw still life. I didn't have that kind of basic training in art. So when I went to study at tertiary level, I really could not grasp the notion of time. And I struggled with that. So I needed to figure out a way to apply a creative algorithm to my creative impulses. What does the impact of one's physical energy have in the execution of a work of art or in the realization of a drawing? How can I compress time? Because I realized I was a very impatient guy. I wanted the immediate result. I needed to come to the result as fast as possible. So how do I compress time? And I had this eureka moment, I would say, in my third year of studies where I think I cracked the code. I think I cracked the algorithm. I managed to connect the dots in a progressive way this time, in terms of connecting personal experience to various aspects of art history,
okay,
while at the same time being contemporary. And what I mean by contemporary is that the work reflects the current socioeconomic, political climate of the time. The work functions as a mirror to the issues that pervade the society of the time. And I did that by excavating my past. And the past took me back to a moment in my high school, in RWFIC, in Bosmont, where there's absolutely no real art education at all. And this moment was, in fact, a form of bullying or hazing that I experienced as a young Standard 6 kid. And this moment was, this bullying or hazing was the practice of pulling young kids, Standard 6s, into the boys' toilets of the school and stealing the chalk from the teachers' classrooms and starting to draw rudimentary objects onto the walls of the boys' toilets. And we drew bicycles with chalk, and we forced these young kids to ride the bike and to somehow humiliate them as a rites of passage into the high school subculture. One of the other objects we drew was a candle, life size, on the walls of the toilet, and we forced these young kids to blow out the candle. So that was one of my first contemporary art experiences. I'm going back in time as a student, and I'm thinking that this strange bullying subculture in a public high school in Johannesburg might embody something so significant in that action showcased the lack of art education. We use the chalk from the teacher's classroom. We use the concrete walls of a toilet. We drew simple basic objects that we ourselves in society were utilizing, like a bicycle, like a candle. And then we forced a physical interaction with those drawings. So here I am as a third year researching art history, and I encounter the performance art history of the 1960s, 1970s. And I'm looking at this, and I'm looking at the work of French conceptual artists like Marcel Duchamp from the 1940s and so forth, 1950s. And I'm looking at ancient rock art paintings of the Khoisan. And I'm beginning to see myself as a modern-day Khoi, almost fulfilling the gesture of our ancient ancestors, but I'm doing it now in the 21st century. Drawing on walls, and my walls and my drawings become a mirror to the society of the time. They become reflections of aspirations. For example, I did a very provocative performance piece many years ago. I was actually reminded 2 weeks ago by a colleague of mine at Wits University. Amazing gentleman. I have so much respect for him, and he's now the head of the department at Wits. And he said to me, he remembered me doing this very provocative performance in London where I drew a life-size side view of a BMW with chalk on a wall, and I started to steal the car.
Because also the it felt like an extended piece that I saw you do at Design Indaba in Cape Town, which includes the bicycle, the car, trying to take the wheels off.
Yes.
With the spanner.
Yes.
I mean, even as you're talking about your realization, like I was actually seeing the performance play out again in my mind, because you talk about the bicycle, you talk about the candle and chalk.
Yeah. Like the chalk or piece of charcoal are like the absolute basic essentials to art making. That is the fundamentals to drawing, but also to education, to writing and learning. So when I first embraced the chalk, when I first started to embrace a piece of charcoal, it's me trying to use those basic mediums as a means to critique art making, or the process of art making and the economy of art making. Do we need, can those materials, can our choice of mediums become an economic critique? And I felt that yes, it can, and that was becoming part of my algorithm. And using the wall became a means for me to echo our ancient past. The wall is not a wall. The wall is also a rock surface. And the figurative element of our ancient rock art becomes my body interacting with those drawings. So it had everything in there. And that was what I did back in 1999, 2000. Drawing cars, trying to steal it, trying to change the tires, drawing bicycles and other doors, objects, whatever I could see, I drew. And I began to interact with it. Wine bottles, beer bottles. And I just kind of like felt that I would embrace, I'm using the word embrace a lot here, but I wanted to use the idea of an encyclopedia, almost like this point of endlessness in terms of what I could do and what I could create.
How much is deliberate? So, I mean, there's, in the process of kind of creating, how much is deliberate and how much is kind of looking back over it and then seeing those connections, connecting those dots? Because it also requires a certain level of self-awareness. Like
self-awareness, or I would say intuition. I really love to channel intuition, and I I intentionally create the condition for intuition to be exercised.
Okay.
And as individuals too, we need to exercise the intuitive muscle so that we have the ability to react, decipher, absorb information, spaces around us, movement, and so forth. So the mark making, the line drawing requires an energy. It requires an energy field. And in order to create the energy field, we need to create the conditions for that mark and energy to be created. So there's a lot of deliberate tactics and conditions that I'm very aware of certain parameters, and then once I establish the parameters, I just whatever happens inside the parameters are like the chance thing that happens. But there's a lot of control that happens, for sure. I'm very conscious of the space.
I think you describe it in a very interesting way, because it's about creating the environment.
Yes.
It's not trying to dictate what's going to happen, but literally to create so as a writer, I mean, there are countless books and countless stories about writing practice. And one of the things that people often talk about is your space. So your writing space. It's like
the conditions.
Yeah.
What are the conditions?
Create the conditions and then show up.
Yes.
And then what happens.
Yes. The creative juices just flow after that. And so those kind of spaces I'm very, very conscious of. And I've operated in various challenging spaces over the last almost 25 years now. And my interest in the conditions has allowed me to be, I feel very privileged to have worked in various parts of the world, and to find ways for me as a South African to find parallels to other geographies and other countries and other societies and other communities. Parallel histories, for me, is an important factor to shift through various paradigms. Let's find parallels. Let's connect the dots again, and let's find connections to other communities and societies that share similar experiences, political, economic, personal, and so forth. And then we can create a new discourse. And we can only do that by aligning ourselves to other parallel communities, so that we can actually understand our own communities a bit better and our own societies a bit better. And that's what I've been doing. I've aligned myself to art movements in Brazil, for example, even to Japan. I was a student that embraced a manifesto from Japan called the Gutai Manifesto, which I didn't think a lot of other students were looking at, but I was completely inspired by the Gutai, and various other movements, besides various African art practices and so forth. So I don't want to just look inwards within my own cultural experiences. I want to look globally to other cultural experiences and see how do our experiences here in South Africa relate to others, and how can we learn from each other.
I'm curious, as you're finding kind of your path as a third year student, what is the reaction like around you? Because you are you're carving a unique path because it's your path, but it's conscious. It's relatively deliberate, right? It's not a this is how things operate and I'm going to do that. It's you going, I'm understanding that journey, but it needs to make sense to me, and it needs to have resonance and context and relevance for me to be able to build something for myself in this space. So I am curious about in the environment that you were in, like South Africa then. What are
Talking
the
like late 90s.
Yeah. What are the reactions?
I have to say that my lecturers were quite supportive of me. It's quite surprising. And I'm actually friends with a lot of them today. They come to all my shows. They follow me extensively. It was almost as if what I did injected a new energy into the institution. It was something authentic, what I was doing. And they embraced me. They embraced the fact that I was using video art as a medium. I would set up a tripod with a video camera to document a performance. And then I would show the video of that performance. And that would be a sculpture. So, or I would take video stills and print that for printmaking. Or I would show a video of a performance I did and show that as a drawing. So they were quite supportive of me crossing over all these mediums. And I can't recall being too overly conscious of all these things. They really supported me a lot. I have to say, I have to thank all of them for not shooting me down and just allowing me to just continue on my path. And I have really fond memories. And as I said, my lectures today are fantastic, and I'm still in communication with them after all these years. It's over 25 years, and wow, I remember, and I quote this to students that I interact with. I've been really fortunate to sometimes lecture or grade students in institutions in different parts of the world, the United States, or Paris, or Berlin, and so forth. And I was in my second year drawing class, and my lecturer comes in and he says to me, he addresses the entire class in a very frustrated way. He says, "Where is your struggle? Where is your struggle?" And he turns around and he walks out. And I actually wrote that down in my visual diary. I actually wrote that down multiple times. Where is your struggle? Where is your struggle? Where is your struggle? That the whole damn point of what we're doing in life, whether it's art or journalism or whatever, there is a struggle involved, and we have to embrace that. We have to embrace that struggle as a form of motivation, as a form of purpose. And I use that quote even today, on myself and on students that I engage with. Like, there has to be pain. There has to be suffering. Not in a deep, scarring way, but we have to use our struggle as a tool. And we have to find a way to channel that suffering and struggle in a way that makes us progressive and that allows whatever we do to have an impact on the society, and that also comes with responsibility, and that's what makes us different, I think, to other countries. And as I said, I've had the privilege of exhibiting my work around the world, and as South Africans, we do carry, on our shoulders, the weight of responsibility for the future generations. I always felt that, and I continue to practice that, to be conscious of my responsibility. Are we making art, or are we also making history? And I think there is a massive historical implication to what we're doing right now, today. in South Africa.
Mm. How do you end up in Berlin?
I received a scholarship in 2001 to go to Berlin. And I was just a young, energetic artist. I had no idea what was Europe like at the time. It was my first European trip, actually. And honestly, I really didn't go to Berlin with any plan to make art. I actually just went with the intention to meet girls. That's what kind of happened. Yeah, I just like, man, I really don't care about like working in a studio or anything like that. I just wanted to like socialize, hang out, check out the scene, meet girls, go to bars and cafes and stuff like that. I remember I was one of 2 South Africans in Berlin on the scholarship. The other one was Mr. Kwesi Gule, who's now the director of Johannesburg Art Gallery. Kwesi would drag me, in fact, to the museums with him. He would drag me to Egyptian antiquity museums and all these other contemporary art museums. I was like, man, I don't care about this. Like, where's the party? Like where are we going to after this, And I eventually did meet a lady. And that's the reason why I ended up in Berlin. I always say that one of the best reasons to move to Berlin is for love. If you're not moving to Berlin for love, man, then what are you? What are you doing here? It can't just be the techno music. And
yeah,
the DJ culture.
like I told you, my reference point, unfortunately, is like 1991, just after the wall.
Wow.
Well, not long after the wall came down.
Crazy time.
My image of Berlin is very different from what I see, through your feed when friends are visiting there. And yeah, also because I have a relationship with Germany, because my mother's German, and I was born there, but I haven't been there in years.
Du bist auch ein Afrodeutscher.
Genau.
Ja, ich habe ein Afrodeutsch gewählt in dieser lange Jahre. So, and that was pretty also, like, it was really interesting for me, being in Berlin and then, meeting my ex-wife and being a part of like her community and learning about Afro-German society and so forth, and being a part of that community, which I wasn't aware of at all. So that was like really interesting. I spoke earlier on about parallels and so forth, and then I was like, wait a minute, there's mixed race people in Germany too, and they got their own issues. They definitely have a lot of issues.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I was like, wow, actually being a colored South African, that's pretty cool. I'm not carrying all this guilt. So that's kind of like my biography, my personal life in Berlin over the years, And I kind of like, you have to embrace the new sometimes, and it's easier when we're younger.
Yeah,
because as we were saying earlier on, the older we're getting, the more grumpy old men we are becoming. But that's how I ended up in Berlin, and I have 2 sons there.
You are listening to the Listen to Your Footsteps podcast, a podcast in which I chat to Africans from a cross-section of society and sectors, including art, culture, design, business, and creativity, to name a few. I delve into their journeys, the decisions they've taken to get to where they are, how they do what they do, and everything in between. Essentially, we go wherever the conversation takes us. Because that was also going to be a question of mine, because something I often touch on is fatherhood.
Okay.
And in terms of kind of being a working artist,
yeah,
with all that means, and then also being a father, and
right.
and navigating that and kind of making sense of that, and with you the added effect of coming from one place with a particular, with multiple lenses and perspectives,
yes,
and then going to another place with its own, like you said, your ex-wife, the own issues and own lenses and perspectives.
Yes.
How did you navigate that?
With complete naivety. and complete ignorance, I think, in many ways. You know what, I was so lost. I didn't know what was going on around me, really. I had to rely on my ex-wife a lot to navigate Germany and German society. And that allowed me to focus on my career a lot and on my work a lot. But at the same time, I wanted to expose my sons to global identities and to also embrace the South African heritage in some ways. It's the importance of the South African heritage. But what helped me a lot, I think, was, I guess, having those early years of success and then being able to provide some form of not only lifestyle but access to other places.
Yeah.
To bring them into art galleries, art museums. I'm still huge on dragging my youngest son, who's 14, to art museums every Sunday, and he really has a tough time with me. But I always told him, listen, art museums makes you more intelligent. Just remember that. But just being able to provide access to culture kind of was a really easier platform for me as a dad in Germany, in Berlin.
Have you visited here with them?
Yes, many, many times. Yes, my sons have been here many times. I remember my eldest son, he's 22 now. He had flown with me so much between Germany and South Africa. And at one point, and I'm not trying to flex, to the listeners out there, I'm not trying to flex or anything, but this kid, I think he was 6 years old and he was like an Air France Gold Card member. Like, this kid was flying business class. I was like, yo, you're getting upgrades? You're getting upgrades on me, kid? He had his whole thing. He really knew what to do. I could just leave him. He really knew what to do. He had his TV thing set up. He knew the cartoons thing. He could do all of that stuff. And that's because, Eli was fortunate enough and privileged enough to, we went to Japan a few times with me, China.
That's still my dream.
Multiple times in the United States.
Japan is still my dream destination. Mine and my daughter's. I've never been, and it's the one place I've always wanted to go.
It's been so interesting to see my eldest son grow up now and the impact of Japan on him. It's, as parents, we can only plant those seeds of experiences.
Absolutely.
And he had been to Japan maybe when he was 3 years old and getting 5, 6, 7 years old. And at that time I was working on one of the biggest exhibitions in Japan. It's called the Yokohama Triennale. It's a massive international art exhibition. It happens every 2 years in Yokohama. And I would commute between Yokohama and Tokyo. And this little kid was, I had to buy him a special Japanese pram, so that I could commute with him between the two cities. And years later, this fashion thing developed in him, and he actually started to work with a Japanese fashion label. And his fashion sense has really been inspired by Japan. And I remember all those years ago dragging him into Kenzo, Comme des Garçons, boutiques to buy, whatever merch I wanted to get. And this kid was being dragged with me everywhere. Oyama, Shibuya, and so forth, I'm talking all hours of the day. At night, I would be dragging this kid around. And I think him being exposed so young, now I see it 10 years, 12 years later, 15 years later, that appreciation for Asia and for Japanese culture is still so present in him. Wow, life is we learn sometimes through our youth, and that's what kind of happens to me. And I didn't have a typical South African father experience. I was in Berlin and working around the world, and I just dragged my family with me.
What are your days like now? I mean,
oh my goodness!
You're still in Berlin. I mean, you come in and out. I recently, was it a couple of months back, I saw the piece that you did with the young kid, the pianist.
Kudenblau, yes.
That's it.
We did a concert at the Joburg Contemporary Art Foundation.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, my life in Berlin has changed dramatically over the last 8 years, 6 years. I've really had to recalibrate aspects of my personal life, aspects of my practice. I've had to embrace the idea of failure from a career point of view, from a personal life point of view. And failure, I mean trying to pursue certain things, professional conditions that I thought I needed in order for me to be somehow acknowledged by my European peers. And I made a few errors on that path of trying to, be accepted in Europe. And I've had to learn the hard way. And I've had to be courageous in rebuilding my practice and my personal life. And one of the errors that I made was believing that in order for me to be acknowledged and to be a successful artist in Europe, I needed to have and operate and practice like my European peers, which is having multiple art assistants, studio manager, having the conditions, as we spoke about earlier on, mega studio, storage facility, design department, personal assistant, all of these kind of things, which are the hallmarks of success. So yeah, I'm on this journey, and I'm craving for this acknowledgement within the European art scene. And I start believing that I needed to have what they have in order to be acknowledged by them. So I needed to have all of these things around me. Only to later discover, painfully, that I didn't actually need it in the first place. And that my authenticity and my originality and my creativity actually operates at a different tempo, and that I don't require so much. But I thought I required all of these things. And I ended up creatively in a golden cage. So after attaining all of these things, slowly I started to lose all of it. And in the process of losing everything, I ended up making some of the best art I've ever made in my life. And in the process of losing and failing, I think I actually made some profound works of art that took me from the rough townships of Johannesburg to the rough streets of the West Bank in Palestine. And the point that I'm trying to make is that sometimes we just have to embrace failure as a motivational factor, but also as a starting point for something new.
Would you say you had reached a certain comfort zone, And in essence, what you did was you created your struggle. You created a new struggle. You talk about that quote. You talk about that quote being having such a profound effect and serving to a certain extent as a mantra, right? Or as a manifesto, as a philosophy.
And I lost that.
And you create. So you were seeking this validation.
Yes.
Because you are now in a comfortable enough space to be able to go, okay, what is everybody else doing? Okay, maybe the next level for me is what they're doing.
Yes.
But by pursuing that, you unconsciously or inadvertently, or the universe decided, well, your problem is that actually you need a new struggle. So here you go.
Wow.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. I can't agree with you more on that. Hit the nail on the head. I think I did reach a comfort zone with my life in Berlin. And I started to push, in directions that I maybe shouldn't have pushed. Well, I'm an artist who always wants to generate discourse. And in order to generate discourse, discussions, debates, we need to maybe take risks.
Mm.
So that's also what I did. And I remember the last years of my studio in Berlin. I produced a series of monochromatic paintings, which I refer to as fragment paintings. And over the course of 2 years, during the period of COVID, right? I was in my studio working, drinking whiskey with a lot of young artists around me, having occasional get-togethers and parties and so forth, whatever. At the end of that body of work, I sold one painting. And that was basically just the sign that this doesn't work, the studio doesn't work for me. And even when I had the studio, I left Germany and I came to South Africa. And I was working on the streets of Johannesburg. And the work that I made on the streets was the reason that I could actually buy a factory in Germany. So I'm on this path in Germany, but it's South Africa that's actually allowing me to be on the path. And it's taken me a lot of painful years to actually be conscious of all of these things now. I'm a lot more mature. I'm a lot more aware of my own emotional and creative limitations. And wow, what a journey that I've, that the thing that you most want sometimes in life, once you have it, you realize, did I sacrifice so much for this? And does it actually make me better? Does it make me a better person? Does it make me a better artist? And so I've had these experiences, and I'm not afraid to speak about it. I really think that failure is it's even an important creative strategy to allow the collapsing of things. And that success is sometimes just a facade.
Because also with failure, sometimes you need to try something to know that it doesn't work.
Yeah.
The only way you're going to know that it's the thing for you, it's not the thing for you, or it's the path to take, is if you actually take the first few steps. And I think part of the skill is also knowing whether it's something that you need to push through or just give up on. And
to stop the bleed.
Yeah. There's some things, it's a dip that just needs you to, I talk about living by the one foot in front of the other philosophy. Like when things are tough, I look down and I keep putting one foot in front of the other until I come out of the dip. Some things is not even a one foot in front of the other. It's like, okay, do you know what? This is as good as it's going to get.
Oh, this is as far as I can go.
This is as far as I can go. I tried it. It hasn't worked the way I thought it would work. That's cool. I can take a step in another direction now and discount this one because I've tried.
I think the challenge is for us as individuals to know when to stop.
Yeah.
Or when we've reached the end goal. And at the same time, we need to first take those steps, to take those risks, to take a chance. And that's an important decision to make as well. Are we willing to take that risk on that without being overcalculated, without overthinking? And this is why I love to align myself with young people. I love to be around young creatives. Not all the time, but I have a lot of young creatives around me. And part of the reason is because they don't have fear. And I remember being a young guy and being fearless. And when I was fearless, the world was my oyster, and I felt as if I could accomplish whatever I wanted to accomplish. So the mind of a young person is so important. They are less affected by fear, negative experiences, consciousness, because the older we get, the more we contemplate consequence.
Yeah.
And young people don't think of the consequences of their actions, so they have this bravery. And I think that sometimes the older we get, the more we have to be conscious of ourselves and our moments in our lives when we were young and when we were fearless. Because when we're fearless, we can really achieve a lot. We can really accomplish a lot in life. And it also depends on the individual. Does the individual want to accomplish things, or maybe they don't want to? I think I want to accomplish things. I think that I'm a frontline soldier. I like that militant approach to my art making. And I'm on a mission. And I've done many tours of duties already. I've taken a lot of flesh wounds, a lot of, along the way. But I still believe that I can get up and I can still persevere. And I still have important things to say. Like, I want to make a contribution. And my art is the mechanism for that contribution. So I will carry on. I will continue. And I hope as I go along, I can say things of substance. I can share ideas to my South African audience and also to a global audience.
It's interesting for me to hear you describe your life as an artist and building the studio in Berlin in searching for a certain level of validation.
Yeah.
And it's interesting for me because from where I'm sitting, sitting in South Africa, I was introduced to your work by Mandla Sebeko. And kind of having followed your work, and then I think we met at Design Indaba.
Yes.
And still following your work, and I look at you and I look at what you've done, and it's like, it's not the pinnacle because I don't believe there's an end. I don't believe there's a plateau we reach and then you're done. I look at it more as a journey, and each of these are steps along the way, moments along the way. But I look at you and I go, yeah, the guys made it, right? Sitting in Berlin, traveling around the world.
Shows in Paris.
Shows in Paris.
Milan, New York. Yeah.
Going,
all of that.
When I meet artists here who dream of that as the pinnacle, right? So it's so interesting to get how a person views their own journey.
Yeah.
And because we all experience that. Like I had a moment, I was editor of a magazine, and then I left it. And for people, it was like, are you mad? Like, that's the
pinnacle.
You've reached, like, the end goal. It's like, that's boss mode. And I'm like, I can't do this for 15 years of my life. Like, I can't work in this job for 15 years of my life. So I'm going to go off and do something else. So it's interesting it's interesting to get, and I guess that's the purpose of this. It's understanding how people are seeing their own journey, and to a certain extent, being able to say, you see it like that, cool, and it's great that you're on this journey of growth and evolution and self-reflection and self-awareness and, and all of these, but this is how I see you.
Thank you.
So also recognize that there is a value in what you're doing, even if you don't hear it or see it. And I think it happens to a lot of us, where there are people who are watching and learning and seeing and appreciating. And sometimes you won't see it. You won't get it.
Over the last years, I've tried to redefine success and what that means. And I honestly feel that success is very relative. How do we define it? What is it? Is it a monetary thing?
For me, success has always been personal. It needs you to define what it means for you.
For you. And it could mean health, both physical and mental. It could be living with a very harmonious family. Family life is a success. Health, how we respect each other and how you are respected too, is a form of success. Having a spiritual consciousness and being at peace with oneself is a form of success. And I think that a lot of us believe that, success is like a projection. And we buy into this projection of what success is. But once we achieve that or attain that projection, we might attain that with immense suffering. And we might even suffer in that space of success. It might come with enormous pain. So I think it's really a relative thing in life, and my experiences has made me view success in a different way. And I think that success could be knowledge, being open to learning, by broadening one's understanding of the world. That is success. It's not having shows in Paris and, New York and all of these things, because I think sometimes it really comes with a price. It really comes with a lot of stress, a lot of pain too. And, I've spoken to a lot of successful artists over the years, some way more successful than me, financially, curatorially. They exhibit in more shows, have more space, studios, you name it. They would seem as if they are extremely successful. And they would tell me that an artist who doesn't even have a studio anymore, I now consider myself a nomadic artist. They would actually say that, Robin, we actually admire you, because we're trapped in this mode of survival. To sustain this mode of success requires a level of self-sacrifice and a level of immense personal suffering. I've seen this. They've spoken to me about this. And they're now looking at me in admiration because I've been trying to reduce all my overheads, and I just, these are artists that I admire, and I'm just, wow, guys, one would have thought otherwise. So
when you say that, like when you tell that story, the first thing that popped into my head is if they really wanted,
they would actually do it.
They would actually do it.
Yeah.
And because for every state, there's an element of sacrifice and compromise, regardless of whatever.
But this is why the validation is so important. The search for validation overrides all these other things. So once you don't have all these things, do you still receive the level of validation that your ego requires?
Yeah.
And this is the issue that a lot of people suffer with. I'm speaking of someone who has suffered that. So,
but to a certain extent, let's say you weren't listening, and the universe decided to give you a little push down a particular path.
Yes.
And theirs hasn't come, or they haven't been listening. But you can also do it consciously. I did it semi-consciously, total different space. But and it's also not like blowing my own horse, because it's come with its own struggle and sacrifice,
yes,
which I'm still trying to make sense of. But is knowing that you always have a choice.
And that choice, to be conscious of the choice, I think comes from education. I think if you have the tools to decide, that makes the decision making a lot easier. I'd always say to myself, man, I wish I was smarter all those years ago, and maybe I'd have dealt with things a lot better. I'd be more conscious of certain decisions and situations creatively and so forth. I could handle success and the personal demands of that a lot better if I had a lot more knowledge. So I could navigate all of these things that's coming at me. And so I always say, it's my lack of education maybe that led to whatever failures I had. So I would always encourage young people to educate themselves and to read and to have the tools to deal with all of these factors, all of these things that can come at you unexpectedly. And I've also seen along my path, I've seen artists succeed, and at the same time I've seen life come at them and made them fail. Not the path to success, not career, because you could be on the career path. Life hits you in such crazy, unexpected ways that it becomes very difficult to balance both, the demands of life and the demands of career.
So my viewpoint is, like one of my little catchphrases now is, I'm building a life, not a career.
Wow.
So I look at career as a component, but we live in a world and society where career always, or profession always, seems to be
the definition.
The default setting, like the dominant setting. And for me, it's like, it's one aspect. It's as important as the other aspects. So I look at them equally, which is why, yes, like you could be successful, in inverted commas, on one particular path. But if you're struggling another, then for me, that's not success. It's the life that you're building, the life that you're living.
Yeah.
And it's an ongoing process. I'm never going to reach final destination other than when I leave, what they say, this mortal coil, right? When I leave the physical realm, I won't be finished because I'm constantly evolving and I'm going through experiences, I'm going through moments. And I also believe that all the experiences that I've had that have led me to today have shaped the human being I am today. And it's the good and the bad. So I worry less about the trips, the falls, the grazing the knee, the being held on shoulders. I worry less about those and focus more on, okay, am I able to provide my family with, roof over head, food on the table? I like nice things. I say this often, being able to get some nice things, but also evolving as a human being. Right?
Yes.
And do I feel like I am becoming a better version of myself as a human being? And I'm the only measure of that. You can't measure it. Nobody else, my wife can't measure it. In terms of for me internally, it's like, do I feel like I am evolving?
Yes. Better versions of ourselves should be fundamental. And to become better versions of ourselves, we don't necessarily need material wealth in order to attain that. I'm a sucker for traveling and food and exploring and experiencing culture. So I feel that I can evolve, that I am evolving, the more I'm able to travel and have cultural experiences. And art is the vehicle for that, for me, to enrich my life, to make me understand the world in a better way, and for me to become a better version of myself, because it's through art that I would tap into philosophy. It's through art that I tap into friendships. It's through art that I tap into music. So, I'm not really good at a lot of things, actually. I'm not really good at art. I can't say that I'm multi-talented and, I was a schoolboy cricketer, so what? But I can't say that I have many other options for myself. So I just dedicate myself to what I'm really good at, and I've learned to embrace my limitations and to just go on the journey of art and my passion for art. So I think I'll be on many trips in the future, visiting museums, and embracing those kind of moments, and hopefully, I have people around me who also appreciate that and who also see the value in those kind of cultural experiences, because it can really enrich our lives a lot. It can be a form of healing, being exposed to culture and being exposed to different cultures and different modes of expression. It can allow us to self-reflect and to heal. And, as an example, we can just speak about, I think you can allow me to speak about whatever. And when I go to Paris, right, I already have an itinerary. And I've been doing this itinerary for over 10 years now. I know exactly which cafes I'm going to, which museums I'm going to, on what day, how many museums I'm going to, where I will walk on which bridge. I'm definitely going to Centre Pompidou. I'm definitely going to Palais de Tokyo. I'm definitely going to Musée d'Orsay. I'm definitely going to Fondation Louis Vuitton. I'm definitely going to Bourse de Commerce. I'm definitely going to Fondation Cartier. So I have already like an itinerary of where I need to go over a course of 4 days. And that's what I do, mostly by myself, to have those really deep experiences and to appreciate where I am, to reflect on the life that I had lived, that I'm living, and Yeah, I do. I kind of have an itinerary for different cities that I go to now, you know. And I'm always willing to share that with other people, you know, like, listen, you got to check out Foundation Louis Vuitton, or you got to go here, you got to go. Just because I'm just a pure enthusiast, you know, and I'm not trying to show off or whatever. I'm just trying to say, listen, man, you know, I just love this place so much. You got to check it out. And I try to teach my sons that too. Like, I would take them with me on my itinerary that I have. And the recent trip that I did with my sons was actually was to Madrid. And the first stop is Museo Prado, you know, to look at the Goya paintings, the black paintings of Francisco Goya. And I'm planting the seed, you know, that kind of cultural experience for my sons, you know, like, no matter where you are, no matter what city you go to in the world, you got to go to the Reina Sofia, if you're in Madrid, and you got to go to Museo Prado to look at the Goyas, no matter what you're doing. Maybe catch a Real Madrid football game if you can. So it gives me a lot of pleasure. I just absolutely love it, and it gives me a reason to love and to experience new things.
Dope. Thank you very much, man.
Thank you so much.
This was like a year in the making.
Thank you very much.
Been trying to get you on here for a while.
I know, yeah. Thank you for persisting with me, you know.
The Listen to Your Footsteps podcast is produced by Zebra Culture. If you have ideas of what we can do better, people you'd like us to have a conversation with, or would just like to share a thought, you can email me on info@zebraculture.com. To check out past episodes, go to kojobuffer.com/podcasts. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share with a friend. If you'd like to get a copy of the book, Listen to Your Footsteps, check out kojobuffer.com/book. There are details on the various spaces it's available at. I'd also appreciate it if you could leave a review or comment wherever you listen to your podcasts. Finally, there's the Zebra Culture by Kojo Buffer newsletter, where on a weekly basis, I share a curated list of articles, playlists, videos, etc. that have caught my attention. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed listening to the conversation as much as I enjoyed having it.